And other GOP allies challenging alleged fraud in 6 key swing states. Yesterday, I spoke with attorney for President Trump, Jenna Ellis, and Nevada attorney Binnall on the state of these cases. Do you have a number in terms of what we're talking about? How many ballots have been impacted here?
Well, across the 6 states, we're talking about millions of ballots. And so, I mean, even just in Pennsylvania, wow, you have 700,000. You have more than that in Michigan. You have Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada. I mean, we're talking about a significant number of ballots. And of course, what matters is each individual state saying that the margin of illegal ballots is just so much more than the margin of difference between President Trump and Joe Biden.
We are going to present evidence of real voter fraud, thousands and thousands of instances in voter fraud in Nevada alone by 5 o'clock today that will be submitted to the court. And we have instances, for instance, of 40,000 plus people who have voted twice in the election. That's real voter fraud.
Joining me right now to talk about all of that is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus. He is former criminal defense attorney for O.J. Simpson, and he is the author of Trumped Up, Criminalization of Politics Endangers Democracy. Alan Dershowitz is here. Alan, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You heard what the 2 lawyers for the Trump team said yesterday when they joined me. I want to get your take on whether or not you see a path for victory for President Trump. And we have the 6 swing states and the issues that we're talking about in graphics here that we'll put up while you're talking. I don't know if you got a chance to see any of the hearing last night in Michigan, but the whistleblowers that testified were quite compelling. How do you read all of this, Alan?
Well, I wish I was still teaching at Harvard. I'd give a whole seminar on constitutional creativity, which is what these lawyers are engaging in. They're going through every aspect of the Constitution and trying to find something to hang their hats on. I would also be teaching a course on election security. This is good for the country that we are hearing these issues being raised now. Whether it has an impact on this election or not, or the January election in Georgia, it will surely have an impact on making our elections more secure in years to come. Yesterday, for the first time, we heard 2 things, 2 facts that I had never heard before. Number one, that the number of disputed ballots exceed the margin of victory in several states. That's the key question. You know, the Trump team has several good constitutional arguments on their side, but until now, they didn't seem to have the numbers. For example, in Pennsylvania, we know that Justice Alito set aside a number of ballots that were received after the close of Election Day. Those probably can't be counted constitutionally. There are also equal protection challenges. But now we've heard of hundreds of thousands of votes that may be fraudulent. That will require evidence. We heard yesterday on your show that by 5:30 today, we will see the evidence of this kind of retail fraud. That's distinguished from wholesale challenges. The Pennsylvania case are wholesale challenges, 20,000 ballots here, 30,000 ballots here. But if we're talking about individual ballots, a dead guy voting, somebody brought into the state, you have to have evidence of that, and there has to be a trial, cross-examination. But the clock is ticking. The 2-minute warning has been given, and the Trump team is out of timeout. So they have to be moving very quickly to get the evidence in front of the courts if they want to get this case to the Supreme Court, where they may have a 5-4 majority on some of these issues.
And you know, last night during the Michigan hearing, the chairman of the Oversight Committee said that they want to inspect the Dominion voting machines. People at Dominion continue to push back on these charges, saying, we're an American company, this is outrageous, this is not right. And yet Dominion would not allow the Michigan authorities to inspect the machinery. So what about that? That's a whole nother track that the Trump campaign is looking at. But let's look at some of these hearings. There's a Nevada hearing today, and that's where we will hear that evidence that Binnall told us about yesterday. And this has to do with what he told me yesterday, where U.S. postal workers were told to deliver mail to undeliverable places. In other words, they knew that it was an open parking lot, or they knew that the person moved. And yet the Postal Service authorities told the postal workers to deliver the mail anyway. Those ballots that were delivered came back completed. So he says that they came from dead people, double or out-of-state voters, etc. You're telling me that the 2-minute warning has been sounded. Will they have enough time to prove their case to be heard, Alan?
Well, that's the question. And Dominion certainly has no right to refuse to allow government officials to inspect their technology. No one is above the law. They have to comply with the orders. If the Michigan authorities or other authorities need to go to court, they have to go to court. But they have to do it on an expedited basis, and the courts have to move quickly. The courts have to say, if you have the evidence today, we'll hear it tomorrow, because we have deadlines. December 14th is a pretty hard deadline. The earlier deadline of safe harbor is a looser deadline, but December 14th is when the votes are cast for President of the United States. And we have to have all the facts and all the evidence ready to go to the courts before then, because the American public is entitled to know that this was a fair election in every respect. And this is a nonpartisan issue.
Right.
Every American should be interested in knowing that we have voter security.
All right, real quick on Georgia, Alan, because Sidney Powell has appealed the judge, declined request for restraining order, forcing Dominion voting machine audits. Now we're hearing these stories of upset and questions going into the January 5th runoffs. There's an investigation into what Stacey Abrams' group is doing. Your reaction to what's taking place in Georgia?
Well, I think it's very good that there's an investigation. If, in fact, they are trying to get out-of-state voters to register to vote, or dead voters, families to vote for them, we need to know that. This is a crucially important election in Georgia. Not quite as important as the presidential election, but it'll determine who controls the Senate. So we have to know with 100% certainty. There's no excuse, because we have a month before the election. No excuse for having any problems in the early January election. All these issues ought to be tied down in advance. The presidential issues should have been tied down in advance, too. Some of these challenges should have been made before the votes were cast. Some of them couldn't be made until all the votes are cast. But as a constitutional lawyer, hey, this makes my day. Every issue in the Constitution is being explored. People are learning about the Constitution. People are learning about voter security. It's a great educational process, and nobody should condemn the lawyers for engaging in it. That's pure McCarthyism when you try to disbar lawyers or sanction lawyers for doing their job. They're doing their job in the interest of the American public.
Unfortunately, they are being condemned, Alan. You know that. There have been law firms that have been bullied to not work with the Trump campaign. It's absolutely extraordinary. Alan, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Alan Dershowitz joining us. Quick break, and then the fight for freedom in Hong Kong.